Thank you. Let me recast, I mean, again, to follow up on this discussion, but try to focus it also on the G20 issues, both to you and Isakong and to Lourdes. How do you see the regional versus global interaction? And what would you like to say as G20, from a G20 angle or from an IMF angle, if you like, on the European crisis? And the second point I'd like to make, is it within the G20, in your experience, is there a kind of G7 and emerging markets division? Are the emerging markets in the G20 behaving as a kind of subgroup and the G7 behave as a subgroup? Or, on the contrary, do we see many different groupings within the G20 depending on the issues? I mean, after all, Germany and China, regarding their current account surplus, are more similar than China and India, for example. So how do you see the kind of internal dynamics of the G20?
Yeah.
Who would like to start? Yes, Isakong?
Yeah. With regard to the first question, I think I already answered that the G20 should get involved with the European current issue and any other significant global issues which may become contagious throughout the world. To support my argument here, I would like to provide you one perspective. You know, the Greece has the population of about 11 million, and in the EU GDP is a little bit less than 2%. The outstanding oil sovereign debt accounts for still less than 4%, a little bit over 4% of the overall EU debt, sovereign debt outstanding. Even then, you know, the other side of this globe, Korean housewives in the morning, they pick up the newspaper, see what's happening in Greece. Why? Because global economy is so interdependent and so integrated. I would say that during the Asian financial crisis of 1997 and 1998, I don't think the ordinary housewives in this region or in America or elsewhere outside Asia were so much concerned with what's happening in Korea and Thailand. What that means is during the last decade or so, 2 decades, so the global economies became much, much more interdependent and financially integrated. So we are living in this kind of world. So G20 is supposed to be a global steering committee. So it should get involved in any even the issues at the national level and even Greek issues. Because Greek problem, because it's not managed within the region well, so it now is becoming the global issue. So there is no such national level issue separate from regional level issue or global. It's just all global issues to a large extent. So in that regard, that's why I said the G20 should get more proactively involved in close cooperation with IMF in dealing with this current EU issue, because this is our problem. The global community's problem. It's not just the EU's problem. So that's why I think this G20 should get involved more, engage more proactively. And the second question about this, the internal dynamics within the G20, I think this, again, is a very, very important issue. Fortunately, so far, I think it is the strength of G20 so far, it's the health of G20 so far, is that by issue, countries take sides rather than say, as soon as you sit down and say, okay, this emerging country and advanced country. I think this is a very, very unhealthy thing for G20 as the global forum. So in that regard, I personally don't want to see G7 act like a caucus. That's why I said I was so glad to see that the G20 finance ministers decided not to publish their communique before G20 meeting, which is a very good thing. You know, even before getting into the summit and say, okay, G7 has this kind of position, and that's, you know, that's not the purpose of the G20. So, and BRICS too. I don't want to see the BRICS become kind of caucus. It can't, because they're so much different on different issues. So far, I thought it's very fortunate that G20. I would like to see G20 continue to be that way.
Lourdes?
Yes, on the last point, I do think, and I agree with Ilsacon, that it's very difficult to have caucuses within the G20. I don't say that there's no, sometimes some countries would like to have it.
For issue basis.
Yes, for issue.
Not as regional.
But try to avoid it as much as we can. Because really, yes, the alliances in the G20, they depend on the issue. And you have different positions regarding, for example, when it was fiscal consolidation, some countries wanted to go into fiscal consolidation very quickly, others didn't, and that's the way it, but the same grouping might be completely different for financial transaction tax.
Sure, yeah.
So in that sense, I don't think it works like that. I can tell you that some emerging countries, we consult each other at the beginning of the summit just to know where we are, but there's really very little things in common among some of the emerging countries. And so that, fortunately, it's not working that way. Yeah. And on the second case, I think it's perfectly clear that there's no such thing as a European crisis which is not affecting all of us. I mean, so far, even since June, since the summer, the European crises have affected us all in different ways. So there's the G20, and I think this is precisely what we have to underline. If we don't take coordinated measures towards economic problems, then we will be in a worse situation. I mean, there's not a regional crisis. Of course, Europe has to have the solution and the way it takes decisions. But we have to be very clear that the way it takes decisions, it can affect the global economy. So that's where the G20 has to come in and try to see it. In the G20, there's no small economy which cannot affect all of us. Maybe, since I can say the Greek economy, it's smaller, but I think most of the economies that are in the G20, if they go into a terrible crisis, it will affect the rest of us. Okay. So coordination is, I think, the most important.
Thank you. Jacob, one quick word on the grouping, because we want to turn to the audience now.
Yes, I think that we should recognize that all of these groupings are dynamic concepts. I've been long enough around to remember that initially at some stage they were called less developed countries, then developing countries, then emerging countries, then poor countries, and on the other side of the spectrum, advanced economies, industrial economies. Put differently, those are all rubrics that help statisticians to have tables with data, but by and large, the more the financial markets are integrated, the more everyone is impacted. And finally, in this regard, the BIS, the Bank of International Settlement, is the forum in which all central bankers are getting together. Initially, it was primarily the advanced economies. When the ECB was created and the forum for the European central bankers was created to be put in Frankfurt, it became clear that it will displace the BIS unless the BIS took significant measures. And what did the measures entail? Expanding the membership of the BIS to include countries like Korea and the like, and Mexico, so that you have a broader spectrum. So in the same way that the BIS relates to the Frankfurt, so should the IMF relate to the G20.
Okay. All right. We'll